Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Antonia, welcome. How are you doing today?
I am good. Freezing even though it's late August, but I'm good.
See, eagle-eyed people will start to realise when we record these things because the last time we did one, which was with Emily, it was boiling hot that day. And so we're going to confuse people, I think. Today, we are very, very lucky to be joined by Matt LeMay, product management expert, coach, consultant, and serial author. Matt, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Hi.
Matt, just tell us a little bit about yourself for anybody that doesn't know who you are already.
Sure. So I've been working in product for about 15 years. I wrote Product Management in Practice, which is now in its second edition. I recently wrote Impact First Product Teams, and I have been relentlessly promoting it to the point where those of your listeners/viewers who are already familiar with me are probably sick of me by now. So for those who are not yet sick of me, hi, thank you for not yet being sick of me. I also play music, and I was a music journalist a million years ago. And I'm really interested in the way people work together to do stuff. So product operations feels like a natural topic of interest and conversation.
Fantastic. I would love to dive into your music career. Maybe another podcast episode we'll do that. I think we want to call earlier last week actually, and you started to talk about that a little bit. So yeah, we'd love to dive into that. But hey, look, that's not the topic for today. If I really would like to kick us off today by talking a little bit about your most recent book.
Yes.
Impact's First Product Teams. I'm not sure if this is going to kind of note come on the screen with my thing. As you might see, I've got a whole bunch of, you can't really see it very well, whole bunch of, Antonia's going to go away and get it. But I got a whole bunch of kind of notes that I, there we go.
There it is.
Nothing like
just to complete the set. There we go.
There you go.
Nothing like a good bit of promotion for you there.
Exactly.
You very kindly sent me a copy. I read it in the past week on the train into the office. In all honesty, it was brilliant.
Well, thank you.
Really, really loved it. Absolutely recommend it to any listeners. Go and grab a copy. It's really full, I thought, of real tangible takeaways, things that I could actually kind of go, hey, look, I'm going to pick that up and I want to go and kind of start implementing that. But for ICs and for leaders as well. I said this to you in a chat as well. It really made me chuckle because of how much it aligns with personally my own personal experiences. I'm sure Antonia can say this as well, particularly with the things that we see all over social media, where we're talking about whatever Silicon Valley is doing, whatever Silicon Valley says looks good, it must be good for everybody else. And that's the first piece I'd love to hear your thoughts on a little bit more, because you mentioned it a couple of times, I think, throughout the book.
It's funny. When I used to do a lot of trainings with bigger corporations in the US, the first question I would get asked usually was, how does Google do product management, or how does Facebook do product management? Not as many people ask that one anymore. And I had an exercise I used to do where I would say, okay, we want to know how Facebook does product management. Before I answer that, I want you to take out your computer and take out a piece of paper. You have 10 minutes to use Facebook.com and write down every single thing you would fix on day one as a product manager at Facebook. And within 5 minutes, most of the group would run out of paper. And I would say, I don't do this to specifically throw shade at Facebook or at Google or whatever product we used, but rather to point out that the challenges you're experiencing are likely more similar than you think to the challenges that these other companies are facing in terms of stakeholder management, in terms of actually figuring out how to subtract things and streamline experiences and make them cohesive and compelling, in terms of just like how to balance the needs of the business with the user experience. These are all things that every company has to navigate within the particular context of their business model and their customer. Where I think we've gone astray is that folks now see their business model and their customer as impediments to doing work the right way, rather than the signposts that should be pointing them towards the right way for them to do their particular work. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, we can't be product led because we're B2B, or we're regulated, or we're this, or we're that. We can't do things the right way. And I think that mindset's just done a lot of harm, and it's been really demoralizing to folks. And it's left folks in a position where they have a great excuse to not really try and not really learn. So my hope with this book was that it would provide some questions, some conversation starters that would align product managers to the commercial reality of their work rather than leaving them battling the commercial reality of their work in the name of abstract best practices.
Yeah, I absolutely love that point. And I think this is also part of why I connect so much with your books. They are genuinely some of the most, both your most recent one and Product Management in Practice, are some of the books I reference the most with my coachees.
Thank you.
And it's genuinely just because it's a very rare case nowadays. And it's awful that it's so rare, right? It's a rare case that people are actually this honest about the reality of doing product in all companies, not just in the ideal case scenario companies. But I think this focus on impact, this focus on working with your bottom line rather than against it, I think is something that we also need to be really mindful of in product operations.
Yes.
Right? Not flying this dogma flag of no, this is product management best practice and this is what we're operationalizing, and you just deal with it, right? And really going a level deeper and saying, okay, what does good product management look like in this company, in this organization? And how can we help create systems that help product managers live within that reality and make the most of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get right into it because I think we've likely seen some of the same issues around, I would say, destined to fail implementations of product operations, where companies hire product ops people and they're basically like, all you have leverage over is process. And we just want you to like change the way people work, but not dig into the commercials, not dig into the goals, not actually touch the commercial heart of how product is done at all. Just kind of like change the tools, like get people using Jira rather than using something else. Get them to use this road mapping tool rather than keeping their roadmaps in Excel. So when you set up, it's so powerful when done correctly, having folks whose job is to really, as you said, look at like, how do we create consistency? How do we help align teams to what really matters? And how do we do that in a way that is our way? It's so valuable to have that. But honestly, most of the situations I've been in where product ops teams are implemented, it doesn't feel like that's the remit they're given. It doesn't feel like they are given enough leeway, enough creativity, enough room to actually think through how to have an impact. And then teams turn around and companies turn around, they're like, our product, there's the whole, like, they're doing work around the work. They're not doing the really impactful work. And it's like, you literally didn't let them. So like,
what's going on?
yeah,
Like what do you expect? Yeah,
like trying to force an entire function to adopt tooling that doesn't suit their needs is bad. And I think that should not be a controversial statement, but it still kind of surprises me how often there is magical thinking around tooling, and conversations about tooling serve as a completely distracting and ineffectual stand-in for conversations about customers, about money, about the things we actually need to have conversations about. I worked with one company that they weren't really doing road mapping at all. And when I asked them what their approach to road mapping was, they said, well, we've been evaluating different road mapping tools, and we're 6 months into our evaluation process, and soon we'll have a roadmap tool to roll out through the organization. And I'm like, so what do you do now? And they're like, well, this is what we're doing now, is we're evaluating tools and we're figuring out. I'm like, but how do people like know what they're working on? How do you solve these basic communication challenges? How do you coordinate to make sure that teams are working together to take on the most important work rather than just retreating to their low impact silos and doing the work that's easiest to do? And nobody wanted to have that conversation because that's a much harder conversation.
I mean, I think this is really interesting. Because I'm certainly where I am at the moment. I've been a lot focused on the very tactical bits and pieces. There's been a huge amount of tactical things that we've needed to do. So I have been very focused on actually the tooling, the processes, bits and pieces like that. But I absolutely love the piece that you've kind of hinted on there, which is, look, both of you have hinted on, which is, we need to understand how our business actually operates rather than what we think it should be doing. I think there is also a lot of this push to say, hey, look, we need the business to be working this way. It really reminds me of Agile kind of 10, 15 years ago, whereby, you know what, Agile consultants were coming into a business and saying, you need to change the entire business, the way the entire business works to fit this template. And we know that was just rubbish, to be fair. But we still seem to be stuck in this position of saying, hey, look, we need to do product management this way. And we're always butting heads against the way that the rest of the business wants to work. You know, we seem to be afraid of businesses being very driven from top down. It seems to be very anti being a sales-led business. Whereas actually, why aren't we looking at this and going, well, this is the business. This is the, and without a monumental shift, and what is absolutely across the entire business to change that, we need to actually focus on that is how the business works and how do we best align to that? How can we be as efficient and as effective as possible for the way that business is currently operating now and being successful with it? I think that's also a piece, is that a business is being successful. Obviously, if it's not, that's a different matter. But if a business is being successful in its way of working, why are we wanting to drastically change that to fit a narrative from another business or from another organization or another way of working?
Yeah, I mean, I have some stories from the Agile trenches. I wrote a book about Agile and waded just deep enough into Agile world to run screaming from it. The thing that really blows my mind, so I was working with a company in the US that had just gone through a big scaled Agile transformation. They brought in those consultants. All the business analysts had woken up one morning and been told, you are now product owners, because the consultants said you have to be product owners. And they were like, why? What does that mean? And by the time they asked that question, the consultants were gone. They had whoosh, disappeared into the night with millions of dollars, I'm sure. And so I was brought in with some other folks. The first questions that they were asking me, they were like, what's a product? How do we define a product here? And I was like, I can't answer that for you. Like, that's a question you need to apply some critical thinking. You need to figure that out locally. What does a product owner do? Is a product owner different from a product manager, from a scrum? I'm like, these are all things that we can figure out together. But your question, your answer is going to be a local answer. So I did this work with them. It was challenging work. 6 months later, I get a copy of the Harvard Business Review in the mail, and the cover story is about how that Agile consultancy working with that company achieved 100% Agile adoption at scale. And that was the moment where I was like, that's why this is happening, because there is this bizarre echo chamber of people coming in and seeing the implementation of process as an end goal. And you can achieve 100% adoption of anything if you don't care if it works or not. The funniest thing I think I heard when I was doing more Agile stuff was a genuine fear. People would say, well, what if we change things until they work, but then they're not Agile anymore? I'm like, what if you change things until what if it works, but that's bad because you didn't follow the special magical thing that a bunch of people made up? I mean, there's some galaxy brain thinking in Agile world still. There are still some folks who will argue that if you change if you change the 3 questions in this daily stand-up, then you're not really doing Scrum. And then 5 years later, somebody will be like, actually, you should have changed it all along. And it's like, oh, I can't do this. Can't do it. Don't care. Don't want to talk to sad people in a windowless conference room about made up things. So I definitely think that, I gave a talk a while ago called The Myth of Product Mindset, because it's another thing that just gets deployed. Be like, well, we need to cultivate a product mindset. I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, we don't know. And I'm like, well, then you probably don't need to cultivate it if you don't know what it is.
I love that.
We need to be product led. I think you touched on something.
Yeah.
We can't be sales led. I'm like, I don't know, what's your business model? If you're selling something, maybe you're sales led, and maybe that's fine. I worked with one product team a while ago that was so upset and afraid of being sales led that they had stopped talking to the sales team because they were like, well, we need to become product led. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just get sales in and have them do a demo, right? I was doing this coaching engagement. I was like, let's just have sales come in, demo the product to us the way they do to, prospects. If you're 30 seconds into the demo, the product managers are all looking at each other, it's Zoom. So they're looking at the camera in panic and back channeling. They've got the panic back channel eyes. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? They were like, well, they're demoing an old version of the software. Okay, well, and the salespeople are like, yeah, we know you won't set up a new version for us to demo to customers. And product managers are like, well, yeah, because like that's not our job. And I'm like, this is bad. Like it is literally impossible that anything else you're working on is more important than this. So again, I think these abstract concepts of like being product led, being agile, having product mindset, they take on this weight that actually shuts down people doing what they should be doing and having the conversations they should be having and thinking critically about whether the ways they're working are helping them achieve their goals. It also happens with the way people set goals, where people are like, we're doing OKRs the right way. And I'm like, okay, what are your OKRs? And there's like, there's 1,000 of them. And we only pretend to care about them once a quarter. And I'm like, okay, bad. Like, don't care. Bad, bad, bad. Like,
I love this point because I think this is also exactly where product ops can hold such a mirror to product leadership. When people go, we want to have a product mindset. It's like, great. Concretely, what does that look like? What are the behaviors that need to change for us to be able to say we have a product mindset? We want to be experimentation driven. Fantastic. What are the prerequisites for us to get there? Right. And that's the difficult conversation. And I think it's influencer driven, right? I think in product management, we have a huge amount of influencers who, let's be honest, all have their very own agendas, whether that's people with consultancy companies giving you just enough information to have an aha moment, but not enough to transform on your own. Right? Or whether that's playing into egos, whatever it is, everybody kind of has their own agenda. And this idea of we need to be such and such company without any meaningful plan of what that actually looks like, I think that's where a lot of the issues start coming up. Because especially if you do not have a dedicated product ops person or product ops team, if your CPO just comes to you one day as a director and says, all right, next 3 years, we are delivering engineering excellence and we are focusing exclusively on that. You're like, fantastic, but we still have this roadmap. Like we still have customers. We still have things that have to get done day in and day out. And it's cognitive dissonance at the end of the day.
It's funny. I do consulting work just as myself, and I lose a lot of prospects now the same way I did when I was doing agile consulting, which is by asking them like, people come to me like, we know exactly what we want. We want this, we want that, we want to be product. And I'm like, then why aren't you? If you know, if you want to be all these things, if you want to be agile, if you want to be this best, like what, like, not a trolling question, like genuinely, what's stopping you? If this is the most important thing, what's stopping you from getting there right now? Which I thought was going to be like a clever gets me in the door question, but it turns out it's usually like a strangely awkward, frustrating question, because I think folks don't realize how much change management and how much like that you can't just keep everything you have and throw agile on top of it. You can't keep doing what you've always done and throw OKRs on top of it. You can't keep doing product the way you've always done and throw product ops on top of it. There are things that actually have to change, and some of those changes have to be lateral or subtractive or not just additive changes. And honestly, most organizations I've worked with really struggle with that. I worked with one organization that had domains that were misaligned with initiatives, and I was going to work with them to align them, but instead somebody had read Thinking in Bets, so they added bets, because at that executive leadership meeting, nobody would give up the concept they were attached to and the one that their kind of influence came from, but somebody else could add something else in. So I think one of the real challenges, one of the reason a lot of agile transformations failed, one of the reason a lot of product transformations and transformations of all kinds fail, is that you have to be willing to lose something and change something to get something. And I honestly don't think most organizations are really having that conversation about like, okay, if we are to implement this, what do we have to give up? What do we have to lose? What do we have to change? And that's where the real work happens.
I smiled so much when you said change management, because as I think, as we all know, that is the hardest part. I mean, that's the hardest part about anything in a business, is managing through the business, big or small, through change. And Antonio and I both know for sure that change management is the hardest part of our role. by a country mile. And I think absolutely that is the reason why those conversations ended. Because that is the hard part. It's absolutely fine to say we want to do this, we want to be product led, okay, and you may have an idea how to do that, but then you've got to follow it through. And another big part about product operations is it is not a short-term venture. It's not a, hey, come in for 3 months, 6 months, go and fix it all, and then we're all good, and then you can walk away. So much of this is a long-term prospect, and it's not just putting those changes in place, it's not even introducing them, it's making sure that people stick to them as well. The changes in the way that they're working day to day, week to week, the way that they do planning, the way that they interact with customers, with research, with the other parts of the business. And that is hard. You know, when you work with different people of different personalities, some that are absolutely eager for that change, and others that are like so set in their ways. They've got their tools, they've got their spreadsheets that are all really nicely aligned. Even though it takes them forever to update it, they know exactly what they're doing and they're comfortable with that. And the idea of that change is very difficult, very scary for them to deal with. And, so absolutely, I think that's a big key area.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with a lot of teams where there's sort of a sense of the things that need to change, but there are certain pockets or people who are sort of held to different standards or allowed to operate differently. The one I've dealt with the most honestly is that I will work with companies where we spend all our time in decks. We can't do decks. We can't just be trading these massive PowerPoint decks. We need to work in shorter things. We need to have, and like everyone except for the executives does that. But the executives, like once you get to a certain altitude, it's all just polished nonsense decks. And it's not going to work. I'm like, look, if you are telling teams to be bold and subtractive and have like your one metric that matters and every team's going to be accountable for this, but the corporate strategy is still like 50 slides of nonsense that you came up with on a retreat where you all pretended not to hate each other for a few days, but everyone just tried to push their own agenda into this thing so they could point at slide 37 and say, look, that's mine. That's what we're actually doing. Forget the other, 49 slides. Then it's not going to work. Like it's just not going to happen. You are going to severely constrain your ability to actually implement this change if it becomes, this is how I want these other people to work, but I am a special person who can continue working in ways that constantly thwart and work against the very changes I'm trying to enact. I did a really interesting research project for a CPG company in the States like 10 years ago now with a phenomenal marketing leader who was basically like, how come nobody believes me when I say that we want to change? Part of what we found was we wrote up this whole thing. This was me and Trisha Wong, my business partner in the States, on these sort of zombie beliefs, right? This idea that like once people have been through 3 or 4 failed transformations, they don't believe it anymore. They see their job as to wait it out. And those are usually the people who are the most credible within an organization. They're the people who've been there for the longest. They're the trusted voices. They're the ones who say like, yeah, no, there's this new person who says to do this, but like, we've been through this before. We went through this, with Six Sigma. Now we're going through it with Agile. Now we're going through it with experimentation, whatever. But like, at the end of the day, just keep your head down and keep, don't rock the boat and you'll be fine. And this leader was really, really receptive to that idea, like really, really took it to heart. And a lot of what it came back to was to kind of bring the conversation full circle. We have to define what innovation means here, and we have to find examples of it here that we can point to and build on. We can't hold everybody accountable to an abstract enough idea that it can be weaponized selectively to actually reinforce the status quo. And I think that's exactly what winds up happening when you have these vague concepts, right? I mean, I think you could make a pretty sound argument that the entire Agile movement has been co-opted to reinforce the very hierarchies it was originally intended to challenge, right? Agile was like, let's move authority to the edges. Let's focus on the people building things. Let's focus on change. Let's focus on our customers. And now it's like, got it. Let's have a 300-page operating manual that says exactly how leadership is going to make every decision and then cascade it to other people. But when you're operating in these broad, poorly defined, sort of context agnostic terms, then you can have the comfort of the status quo with the rhetoric of change, which is where I think a lot of these things land.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, especially having worked with a few bigger companies and sort of consulted them on product ops, on certain change initiatives. Remit very quickly becomes something I need to speak about with them because I can work with a team, I can work with a department, but at a certain point, we will hit the ceiling. Because if the rest of the organization still throws things over the fence, if there are still senior leaders in other departments for whom the rules do not apply, then you will never be able to truly commit to the new way of working. Right. And I think this is something that we don't talk about very often, but
Mm.
even in smaller product ops implementations, is exactly as you said in the beginning, right? You get to do this very small thing over here. You get to manage our tool stack and make sure that we have templates defined for every little thing. But oh no, no. What the C-suite does, that's incomparable to any of that. They just need to be able to do things very quickly, immediately, the classic swoop and poop, and you
Yeah.
have absolutely no way of dealing with it or doing anything about that level of disruption. So I think, especially in the larger organizations, there is always a point where, right, to your point, you can become product led. You're going to have to let go of being sales led. You cannot do both. And somebody needs to tell the sales team that you are now product led as a company, not just as a product team.
Yep. And has to tell them what that means.
Exactly.
Which is, can I share with you, this is a bit of a tangent, but my favorite template rule, since you talked about templates, this has been like my new thing with templates is I'm like, you are not allowed to share a template until you've filled it in 3 times. And this has been so eye-opening because I work with so many companies like, oh, product just needs to fill out this template. And even if it's not a big template, there will be like 1 or 2 questions that are just really hard to answer where people get stuck on them. And then that getting stuck just like derails the whole thing. So I've implemented with the teams I work with and in my own work a rule that it's like, I will not send a template to anyone unless I've been able to fill it out 3 times with real data in the time frame that I expect other people to fill it out.
I love it.
If I can't, then it's probably the wrong template.
Yeah.
Because it's easy, it's easy in a sense to ask for things. I think this is the other like unfortunate pattern that product ops gets put into is product ops is pushing stuff to teams. It's like, here's the new template, and you become the enforcer of the template rather than the partner to help teams actually achieve their goals. And it just puts everyone in a lose-lose situation, right? Because then you are enforcing process somewhat arbitrarily. Then in a lot of cases, when I've come in and done that kind of operational work, product teams are like, cool, so if we just don't do what this guy tells us to do, then he'll be gone in 6 months. Love it. Like, let's just not do this because we can just go to our leadership if they're not bought in and be like, yeah, Matt gave us this template. I'm like, it's not really what we need to do. I don't really know what he's on about. And if leadership is like, aha, like, Matt, your template is wrong, then it's like, this is never, ever going to work. So, I think product folks in particular, like part of why of all the cross-functional ops groups, like I feel for product ops the most because product people tend to be the most pathologically busy and protective of
100%.
like
I think
like
it's
DevOps,
easily the worst group of people to do ops for.
totally. Like DevOps, it's like, yeah, we need help. Like help streamline this. Like design ops, it's like, cool, yeah, let's systematize these things. Product ops, it's like, go away, never talk to me again. I'm busy. I hate you. Stop.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
I mean, like, it's the same thing doing product coaching and consulting, right? Like, I'll come in and be like, I'm here to help you. And they're like, who are you? Who sent you? Am I fired? Go away. And I'm like, hey, no, like, I'm actually like, I'm here to like help your team deliver more impact. And they're like, all right, here's the 78 reasons why my team cannot deliver impact. And I'm like, whoa, okay, let's stack rank those and figure out which one and they're like, nope, meeting's over. I'm busy. I hate you. And I'm like, I get it. I've worked in product. I know what it's like to be busy, but also like, I tell a lot of people I coach, like, busy becomes a coping mechanism at a certain point. Like, busy becomes something to hide behind. Busy also becomes harmful to your team because if you are too busy for people to come to you with their questions and their concerns and their insights, then you are severely limiting the value that the rest of the team can have. So I try to advise people to never say I'm too busy, but rather to look at the value of the activities they're doing and say, if I were to kind of draw a line, like what's kind of the water level where it's like, above here, there's value, below here, can either say no to it or delegate it or do something else. But gosh, I feel for y'all. Like it's tough out there trying to get time with overworked, underappreciated product people.
For
There's a key
sure.
there.
But
There's a thing there is do we, and this is obviously a bit of a sweeping statement, but do we believe that they are genuinely that taxed, that maxed out, or like you say, is it just almost a default coping mechanism? Is it a default state of mind that I'm too busy to think about anything else? I am fully focused on, my product management and silo and tasks and things like that.
I think it's
I
both.
mean, exactly. I was going to say, I think it's both. I think it is. I think people are genuinely busy, but I think the busyness comes from kind of mismanagement of their workload. Like, whether that is sort of quote unquote their own fault, or whether that comes from higher up where everything is a priority, so nothing is a priority. I don't believe that so first of all, PMs are the ones that are most routinely burnt out and overworked. Absolutely. And pulling them back from the brink with operations is something you first need to sell very hard, because it's exactly like you say, Matt, right? The very first knock on the door, you very much get an F off. I'm way too busy. Like, I'm already double booked 3 times today. What do you want from me? And being able to prove your value, prove your worth in that context, while at the same time helping them to understand that, yes, you are extremely busy, but you being extremely busy is not the most valuable thing you could be, or not the most valuable thing you could do. And for some, that's a really tough pill to swallow, because it's really unfair if you think about it, right? Like, I'm doing so much work, I have no time to myself, no time to think straight, and I'm not even moving the needle.
Well, that was in product management and practice, reaches for book.
But
I had
Andy, you
these
got that there.
different archetypes of bad product managers, and the one that I relate to the most of my own archetypes is the product martyr. That was me when I was working in product management. I was like, I'm doing everything. Like, I'm working so hard. My first big product job, I literally I left Thanksgiving dinner to go put out a fire on social media. I was like, I'd do anything for this company, and they don't appreciate me, and they don't understand, and I'm so busy, and I'm getting in early, and I'm staying late. That was comfortable for me. That was through a number of personal things I have worked through with my therapist and continue to work through with my therapist, and also just like the intrinsic insecurity trigger of being in a role where your own output is ephemeral and ambiguous, and people are like, what do you do here? We could replace you quite easily if we wanted to. Busy is I think the default posture, because it is true, because it is defensible, and because it creates visibility. And getting folks to well, not getting, but I think creating that safe environment where it's it's such a hard needle to thread, right? Because you also don't want to just be like, I'm here if you want help. It's also like, no, you actually need help. There are things that need to change, but again, it's not additive. That's I think the big trap that I've fallen into in the past when I haven't thought about it as much, or when I hadn't been through as many of these experiences, was I'd be like, cool, the first thing I'm going to do is add this thing. And it's like, nope, that's not you go and try to add something right away, and folks are going to be way too busy. If you can find something to subtract, something, I love doing deprivation studies where it's people are like, I don't know if this meeting's working. I'm like, cool, stop having it for a month and see what happens, and then rebuild it around what you're missing. Let's just delete the meeting off your calendar for the next month. We'll draft an email right now. We'll send it to people and say, keep track of what you're missing. And if we're missing something in a month, we'll bring it back. And if not, it's gone. Just finding that way to show people that, again, you are not there to be the additive process enforcer, but to help actually free up time and maximize the value of their time. It's just really hard to thread that needle.
Absolutely. But I also think this is something that so many product ops people get wrong in their first product ops engagement, or at the beginning of a new job. And I talk about this all of the time, so people are probably sick of it by now, but it's such an important point, because the biggest mistake you can make as a product ops person is filling your plate with other people's nonsense. Legitimately, and just being the sort of receiving agony ant for the entire product team, where somebody has a problem with that template, but the other person thinks they're not doing the template hard enough. And you have a plate full of minute tactical details that on the whole mean that you do not have the time and focus and space required to do big things that actually move the needle. Things that take months, not improvements that take weeks. And then because you've done, and I've been that person, right? That's been in that super tactical space for months. And then 4 months later, people are like, well, she's been here for 4 months. She's done fuck all. Like nothing has actually meaningfully changed for us. And I was like, but I'm so busy, right? It was exactly that martyrdom. Like I'm doing so much. Look at all of the complaints that I'm listening to, but I wasn't actually moving the needle. And that's a death sentence, because when you work in a space that is already kind of contentious, people already, are a little skeptical about it, you do have to prove your worth to a certain extent. And you do that by doing some really high leverage stuff.
And it's funny too, because there is high leverage tactics and there's low leverage tactics, and
100%.
figuring out what the landscape is of that. Like I remember one team I was brought in and they were like, we are having trouble with like decision rights on a cross-functional team. We don't know who decides when something's good enough. We don't, and I horrifically facilitated like this really contentious hour-long meeting. I was just struggling. And then eventually I was like, well, what's the last decision you made? And they were like, we're not really making a lot of decisions. I'm like, all right, well, then, like, what's going on here? Like, if you're not making a lot of decisions. And it turned out it was really just, as a lot of things are, assumptions about communication styles and cadences. Like, the issue was really like, people thought other people were being jerks to them on Slack, or people thought that other people weren't respecting their time. And it's been really interesting to me how often, one of the first things I do with any team I work with is I write a comms manual for the team. That's probably the single most meaningful intervention I've done with most of the teams I work with, where we sit down and it's literally like, when someone on the team emails you, how quickly do they expect a response? What are the channels for urgent communications? What are our working hours? How do we handle communications outside of working hours? And these little, quite tactical things often have an appreciable impact in this broader question of trust and psychological safety, and these big concepts that companies really struggle to grapple with. So, I think that, especially when it comes to, I've gotten just really fascinated by this concept of like communication architecture. Like, how do you architect and create systems for communication? Like, how do you manage? I have a whole style guide I use now for asynchronous document editing, which has honestly been like so valuable. So like, the way I do things now is I'm like, if you are sharing an asynchronous document for review, which a lot of folks do, here's the style guide. And it basically says, if you cannot commit to something, highlight it in red and leave a suggestion. Then say, if you are willing to commit, but you don't like it, highlight it in yellow and leave a suggestion. Otherwise, all comments are taken as an FYI. And it's been really interesting to just make this little change, because now the assumption is that it's okay, right? People pick their battles a little bit more, and the stuff that gets highlighted in red is the really important stuff. So we don't wind up in that situation where there's 8,000 comments that all need to be resolved, or maybe they don't. We haven't talked about it. It's an assumption. It's not an explicit agreement. We actually have a very specific agreement about at what point this document is considered live and ready to go. And again, that's so tactical. It's literally like highlighting things in colors. It doesn't get much more tactical than that. But sometimes these very tactical interventions actually begin to reshape the broader human system of how people work with each other. I'm fascinated by this. Like, it's just so interesting when you realize that, in a lot of cases, it is like pretty simple tactical miscommunications that are actually creating low trust environments, like major technical team shape and size and operating model things.
I think this is a really interesting piece. I think, the whole, what low impact tactical, high impact tactical. Certainly relating back to your book in particular.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, nice little segue there. One of the things that I always come back to this conversation, and again, Antonio's heard me say this a lot of the time, is how you are in a position of trying to elevate the product way of working to be better. In a number of companies that I've built product ops in, I found kind of the general basics of product management kind of lacking.
Yeah.
And one could argue, okay, well, are they still being successful in what they're doing? Yes, but how long is that sustainable for? Having done product management myself for kind of 10 years, and you have that, knowing that there's going to be a crunch point whereby, look, that is not sustainable anymore and it's going to come crashing down. I think a lot of the tactical work that certainly I end up doing is looking at saying we need to put the basics in place. I need to elevate you. It's not just about making us more efficient, making us faster. It's not about us delivering more, really hitting our OKRs. It's just putting the basics in place through some of those very small tactical changes. And it's that cumulative approach, that cumulative output of all of those smaller changes that kind of go, hey, do you know what? 6 months, 8 months ago, we were operating very, very differently. Look how much better we are now. Yes, we've still got a long way to go. But do you know what? We've got that foundation in place. And I think that's some of the things that I end up getting drawn into a lot more than other product ops people. In just going, we need to get that foundation working right before we try and tackle some of that bigger, more complicated beast.
Yeah. I mean, again, so much of it comes down to like the human systems that you're building into, right? Like if it is if there's a baseline of human dysfunction, you can't push processes and templates into it and not expect those to be immediately subsumed by the baseline of human dysfunction. Like that's just what's gonna happen. I think, my like great mission in life is to get folks to recognize that communication is literally everything. Like communication is how we create these things. It's like people think they have an idea and then they tack on the communication of that idea, but it's like, no, your communication creates the idea. Like the way you express the idea is the idea. The way that the team works together to discuss and understand something, like that is the thing. That's not just a little like fluffy add-on. That's like the heart and soul of how we do things. And it still bugs me so much when I'm like, that's what matters. And people are like, road mapping tools. And I'm like, no, like it's not, it's not the tools. Like it's communication, it's human stuff. And I think there's so much room to improve and systematize and operationalize the way that teams work together. And like use this tool, not that tool, is a very, very small second order, like third, fourth order, like what does the tool need to accomplish? Why are our current, I've told folks, I'm like, you don't know how to ride a bicycle and you're looking for a motorcycle that shoots lasers. Like you are over engineering the tools, and then you wind up in that whole cycle where it's like, oh, we tried the tool, now we have to decommission the tool, which also takes time and money, and then we have it's so easy. It's easy to mistake that for progress. It's also easy for companies to spend a lot of money on tooling and then tell me that I'm expensive, and I don't like that because I do a good job.
Yeah, I think like for me, the communication aspect is so important. And I think what people often over-index on when it comes to transformation, becoming better at doing product, is frameworks. And it's like frameworks for the sake of frameworks rather than frameworks as markers of this is when we need to have a conversation, or this helps us frame our thinking so that we can have a conversation about stuff breaking down, right? Like I'm working with a client right now and I've gotten them to do weekly OKR check-ins. And in the beginning, everybody was like, why do we have to do this? Like every single week? Are you kidding me? Like, is this just a reporting thing that our leader wants to see all of the different percentages? And it's like, no. But if you tell us you are not confident that you will hit this metric by the end of the quarter, we can have a conversation about that. And we can help you. We can figure out that maybe you have too much on your plate. We can figure out that maybe that goal we thought was worthwhile actually isn't worthwhile anymore, right? It's about having the time and place to have these conversation starters, to have these questions that prompt you to understand what you're actually communicating, understand whether your mental model is still the same mental model or whether it still applies to the thing you're working on and you've been discovering. And I do feel like a lot of inexperienced product companies or companies wanting to transform now to the product operating model, simply adopt tools and processes and frameworks without having the skills to have the conversations that underlie those things.
I'm really glad you brought that up in the context of OKRs because, OKRs again, like it's not like this magic secret, like say OKR 3 times in
Right.
front of the mirror and like, Andy Grove will appear and you'll be managing teams with 10x efficiency. It's like, it's not how this works. It's a set of things that are related and tend to be harmonious and complementary and
Right.
work well together. But, I'll work with teams that are like, oh yeah, OKR is really important. I'm like, how do your OKRs connect to your sprint planning? And they're like, why are you even asking that? That makes no sense. I'm like, well,
Right.
what's the purpose of OKRs? And they're like, OKRs. And I'm like, okay, but like what, why do we do OKRs? And they're like, to have 3 to 5 of them. I'm like, no, that's not the answer. To score a 6 or a 7. I'm like, no, this is like a way of, again, I think Christina Woodke said it better than anyone. Like it's a method, it's an instrument of focus. Like
Right.
this is what really matters to us. But if you never look at it again, then it can't do that. There's no way it's going to do what it's supposed to do. I think a lot about, I don't know if either of you have read the Ben Goldacre book, Bad Science, which is about medical quackery, which is very relevant at this particular moment in time. But he talks about this idea that I think about all the time when it comes to ways of working, which is the proprietization of common sense. He's like, most of the things that we know are good for us are pretty common sense. Like go for a walk, drink some water. Like most of the health interventions that exist are not fiddly. It's like we kind of know that there's a set of things that are pretty good for most people. And beyond that, it mostly depends on a lot of very personal things. And I think it's parallel. He says that a lot of wellness culture is taking one thing that's common sense and then dressing it up in enough nonsense for it to be copyrightable and proprietary. And it's like so many product ways of working things. It's like, yeah, there's one thing here that is like really valuable and also not that complicated. Again, with OKRs, like there's a few things like that. I love the idea of having a qualitative objective, like a rallying cry with measurable key results against it. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that's really smart. I love the idea of just like setting and working and like evaluating against goals on a regular cadence, like those. But I think there's a tendency to overvalue the proprietary nonsense and undervalue the common sense fundamentals. And it's really annoying because it's like, there are really good ideas at the heart of these best practices, and they're usually not that complicated. Like how many frameworks and operating models have we had that are like, have a cross-functional team, right? Like empower a cross-functional team to achieve goals. Like that's not terribly complicated. But then we get into these like really fiddly things about like, well, but what's the right? It's like, figure it out. Like figure out what works for you. But when you sacrifice the common sense truth for the fiddly ornamentation, you're never going to get the benefit of the thing. But you are going to be able to spend a lot of time arguing about the right way to do things.
100%.
Interestingly, and there's a piece from what you've both said there that has really struck with me is, a lot of these reports and these measures and things like that often get subsumed into this idea of, well, actually, we need to prove ourselves to others. We're writing a report to inform others, absolutely. The piece that I always find missing is there's another reason for that is self-reflection. Is to when you are writing these things, when you're thinking about what you're writing, when you're looking at your stats, tremendous amount of time, probably more than I should have done at Helios where I'm at the moment, is creating a really kind of robust way of reporting on our sprints and our progress towards our initiatives, etc., etc. And the piece I keep bringing my teams back to is, it's not just for reporting up the chain, because their answer is, well, is anybody reading this sort of stuff? I said, yes, they are. That's one thing. I'm actually more interested in, are you reading any of this? Are you looking at your stats, your progress? Are you interrogating why you succeeded, why you didn't succeed, why you didn't hit, all of the stuff that you plan to do? Because that's important, because how are you improving yourself? How are you looking at what you have or haven't achieved, and saying, well, right, how does this fit into the bigger narrative, into our monthly plans, into our quarterly plans, into our annual plan? At the moment, what you're doing is you're just going and completing, and you're moving on to the next thing, going and completing. And you're not understanding: are you improving? Are you going down? Are we actually going in the right direction? And I think that's a fundamental missed piece, is that it's about self-reflection as well, and self-evaluation of what you're doing.
Graham, I'm not sure if you've heard about this, but there's this technology called AI, and now you don't have to write it at all. You can just feed the... I was having a really interesting conversation with some product leadership folks a couple of weeks ago about, somebody I was talking to ran an experiment where she and a colleague both put notes into a large language model to summarize it, and the summaries turned out quite different. And we were talking about how, like, one of the things that a lot of product people figure out early on is that if you can own summarization, then you actually have found a locus of influence and power. That, like, if you're the person, like, you're like, oh, I'll write the summary, but, like, that's not just out of the goodness of your heart, right? If you're the person who writes the summary, you are deciding what the framing is. You're deciding what's worth including and what's not worth including. You're deciding how things get followed up on and what gets prioritized and what gets deprioritized. And, again, I think that's especially what a lot of us more operationally minded product people, again, out at some point in our careers, right? It's like if you can kind of figure out what information is worth capturing, what information is not worth capturing, how to frame things, that's part of how you do your job. And it's been interesting to see, like, I'm so aligned with you, Graham, that, like, there's value in the doing of these things. Like, there's value. There's especially, I think, value in doing this together. I've been trying to do more things where, like, we summarize the meeting together at the end of the meeting. Like, we leave 10 minutes and we're like, all right, let's write the minutes together. Does this capture what everybody wants us to capture? Is this what we want to report out? Yes. Good. Okay. Off we go. So that, again, we are not doing that thing that I am inclined to do of being like, I control the messaging.
Here's what I think is
Here's what I
important.
think we said. But I just feel like we're in a point where, again, like, people are missing the human point of doing these things and being like, look, AI can churn out a 72-page report in 10 seconds. And I'm like, that is bad. That's bad. That's bad. That's bad. That's bad. That's bad. We don't want that. Nobody wants to read that. Nobody gains anything from, prompting a probabilistic model to assemble 72 pages of slop. It's just not, like, it doesn't help us do the things we need to do. It creates more busy work. It creates more crap, and we're not here to do that. We're here to deliver impact.
Yeah. That's much more eloquently put than I ever would put. We are almost out of time now, and I want to apologize to you, because I had a whole bunch of questions I wanted to dive into about your book, and although we've touched upon kind of little elements of so much of what you've written, we didn't. And so I'd absolutely love to invite you back, and
anytime. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about the book, but again, I think the work that y'all are doing, I think product operations is such an important and interesting and misunderstood aspect of the work we're doing, and it's my absolute pleasure to talk with you about it.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Antonio, any final words from yourself?
Gosh, I mean, honestly and genuinely, not because you're on the podcast with us, but if anybody is looking for a good, actual, real product management book, I cannot recommend Matt's stuff enough.
No, thank
like,
you.
Genuinely, such a breath of fresh air. I learn something new every time we speak, honestly. So yeah, I can't wait to speak more. I can't wait to read more, especially this whole communications rabbit hole you're going into. I think that's going to be a wonderful next book.
I'm very, very excited about this. Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that as well. Communications is a huge passion project for me as well, so really looking forward to that. And I'm really sad, actually, that we didn't get to kind of talk about it. I'm just reading my notes as we prepare for these podcasts, and there was one thing, and I think it was this morning, Matt, I messaged you on, which was the whole good enough.
Yeah.
You mentioned that a couple of times in your book, and just being good enough is good enough. We don't have, it comes back to everything that we've talked about on here, about all these frameworks and the rolling out of the product operating model and things like that. Yet, do you know what? As long as it's working and as long as it's good enough, is good enough. And really just wanted
And
to
it
go.
goes to the point you made about reflection too, right? I told a team I worked with once, I was like, if we make our team's metric for this next quarter, how many cheeseburgers do we throw off the roof? That's fine, so long as we retrospect at the end of the quarter and say, did the number of cheeseburgers we threw off the roof meaningfully impact what the business cares about the most? Like, you need to commit to something and see how it works before you know if it's working. And there's a whole art to that as well, to like getting people comfortable with something being good enough for the express purpose of then retrospecting against it and saying, did this do what we need and what can we learn from it?
We are absolutely out of time today because, as you can tell, we could keep talking about a whole bunch of stuff.
I suspect we could.
But, you know, people that are listening on their travels to work and things like that will probably be getting towards the end of it now.
Take the long way.
Take the long way. So I would absolutely like to thank Matt LeMay, our special guest today, for everything you've shared. Do connect with any of us on LinkedIn. Matt's latest book, Impact First Product Teams, is certainly available now to buy. We're going to put a little link on the screen probably about now, and also when we publish this out as well. Just like Antonio said, absolutely recommend this as a read. I read it in the past week. Absolutely fabulous book. And that's it. Thank you to everybody that's watching today. Antonio and I will look forward to welcoming you on the next episode of the Product Opscast. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.